My name is J.M. Kenny, and I live in Pasadena, California. I was, for 30 years, a professional in the entertainment industry. I produced content to market films for every studio in town, and it was a great gig. And about 5 or 7 years ago, it started to like I was getting less and less of a client base. And I was a little guy, but I made a great living, and I was at a point in my life where it kind of everything was coming together, and was in a situation where it wasn't coming together in a good way. It was coming together in like, I need to start to deal with some of these things. Otherwise, there will be no business 5 to 7 years from now. And unfortunately, I didn't pay the attention because I like the creative producing. I like going out and shooting and doing all that stuff. To answer your question, what was it like before I was diagnosed and what was it like after I was diagnosed? Really, I mean, other than the psychological, destruction I've done to myself, the anxiety, the fear, the unworthiness, all things that are not true at all, but I create in my mind. I almost feel that if they hadn't told me it was Parkinson's, like if they tricked me and said, take this because you've got, something that, is, really benign, but we'll keep an eye on it. I don't think it would have been as heavy as the weight that was dropped on me or that I dropped on myself when my doctor at UCLA said, you got Parkinson's. And immediately as soon as he said that, because it sort of hits you and I didn't cry, I didn't get angry. I just sat there, and it was December of 2012. And I thought to myself, this is right before my birthday. My birthday's in mid to late December. And I'm like, wow, what a total shitty birthday present. And that attitude was wrong. And what I realized is that my life really wasn't any different on Tuesday when I heard about it to Wednesday, with the exception that I created the differences. I created the difficulties in what was going to be, my journey with Parkinson's to date. So I was diagnosed in 2012. I was having some uncomfortableness in my hips and stuff like that, sort of like a nagging, like what people would say, like restless leg syndrome, but I don't really know what that is. But that's where I kind of fell in my mind. It's like I just don't feel, I better go see somebody. And my doctor said, go see a neurologist and take a look at that. And I went to see the neurologist, and he gave me a bunch of tests, this test and, this test, and pick up a dime, and can you do this, and all this stuff. And I think, as Michael J. Fox said, it's like a drunk test, or like a drunk driving test. But the doctor, the neurologist said, I think you're fine. And I said, all right. And so I went about another year and a half, and then I went in to see my regular doctor, and he said, I had this cold that I couldn't get rid of. That, it just seemed like it was lingering on a little too long. And I went to see him, and I was coughing heavily, and he said, do me a favor, go to UCLA, the Movement Disorder Center, and rule out Parkinson's. And I said, what do you mean rule out Parkinson's? Now, I'm 46 at the time. And he said, yeah, I just want to rule it out. And I said, all right. So I didn't think that much of it, but I thought, well, Parkinson's, that's like a later in life, and then I even said that to him, and he goes, well, and he knew, because I worked in the entertainment industry, this would resonate with me, as he said, Michael J. Fox. I mean, he was 29. And I was just like kind of numb, walked out and went to see the UCLA specialist, and was there for like 2 hours and did all these tests and talked to him. And he said, you got it. And he said, even if I took a DAT scan and your levels were high, I would still say you have the early stages of Parkinson's. And when people describe that moment, I hear people say all kinds of things, like it was a death sentence. It's a tragedy. It's just like incomprehensible. I mean, why you? Why me? The reality of it is, it's only tragic if you allow it to be and you stop doing something about it. if you go out and exercise and you go out and ride a bike or you go out and walk, I mean, my wife and I walk all over Pasadena, and we're blessed. We've got the Descanso Gardens to go walk to, which we're members of. I mean, things that if you asked me like, hey, do you think in your late 50s you'll be walking around an arboretum with your wife, looking at trees and hugging giant trees and talking to the nuts on the ground? And I would have said, you're insane. And I would never be with somebody like that. And then I married the plant woman, and she loves the trees and she loves the outdoors. And this is a girl who at a very young age went on it was called Knowles, and it was basically, there's a program where they take kids called Outward Bound, and they take these kids and they take them from the city and they put them in the country, or they put them in the wilderness, and then they kind of have to survive. It's like a survival. Well, Knowles is what the teachers who take those kids out have to learn. And she was dropped in the mountains of the forest in Montana and had to stay out there for 30 days. I'm like, I wouldn't have lasted 30 minutes. As soon as it got dark, that would have been the end of me. I would have said, I'm out, I'm out. But I realized that for me with Parkinson's, and I'm not going to sit here and tell you, I've got the magic elixir or I know how to feel good. It's day to day. It's hour to hour. And it depends on how it arrives and how it wants to mess with you that day, or maybe it doesn't mess with you at all. But when I hear people use the word tragedy or catastrophic, it's tragic and catastrophic if you don't do anything about it. And it's very easy because people go, oh, he's got Parkinson's, he's doing this and he can't sit still, or he's frozen, And yeah, those are things that are in our lives, but it's not the only thing that's in our lives. And it's clearly not the only thing we stand for as a group of people. And I really wish that, more places like Parkinson's Wellness Fund were about taking care of you in the moment, because that's kind of how I have to live my life. You can set plans and set goals, and some of them may be challenging. You may want to climb 7 mountains, and I'm getting a little dyskinetic now.
That's great.
You might want to do something like swim with the dolphins or whatever it is. Don't even call it a bucket list. Just say, this is a goal of mine. You don't have to stop doing goals. You don't have to stop. When I spoke I spoke via the internet at a college in Oregon that was has a big Parkinson's. Oregon State Health, something, really wonderful people. It was hard because I couldn't see the audience, and I like to talk with the audience. Yeah. But one of the things that has been my mantra since before then, and it's not I'm not the original creator of it, but I think it's a great credo to live by, if you will, which is, it's not what you can't do, it's what you can do. Because with anything, I could say, I wanted to win 20 games in Major League Baseball. I wanted to be the lead singer of Journey, whatever my desire would be. There's a good chance that I'm not going to be either of those because the skill set. But, being afraid that you can't walk anymore, being afraid that you can't go out, or being afraid that people are going to judge you differently, that's all stuff that's in your head. And that's all stuff that I think what Parkinson's, really feeds off of. And so if you don't build the confidence in what you can do, then eventually you will be at a point where you can't do it because you will have let it go. When asking the question, has anybody ever treated me differently because I'm with Parkinson's? I have friends that are lifelong friends. High school friends. We graduated high school 40 years ago. In fact, we're actually coming up on our 40th reunion. And we just have a tight-knit class. We've always stayed in touch together. But some of them are very much like, I guess the term would be like doting mothers. They're concerned, and I will never fault anybody for asking. I always said, ask me whatever you want to ask me, because if something I tell you helps you tell a friend whose father has Parkinson's, or sister, or child, God forbid, that, it's about communication, and it's about helping each other out. So I for a longest time I struggled with being public about it, like because I worked in the film industry, and I thought, well, I don't want to be sitting across because what I did is what you're doing, which is interviewing celebrities, writers, directors, producers, actors, the whole gamut of people. And I loved it. I mean, it was like I was making a documentary about a movie every project, and it was awesome. And I miss that production energy. That's about the only thing that I miss, but I really miss the production energy, and the free donuts. But what was interesting was that I was afraid that if I told people, they would do exactly what you asked me, which is they would judge me. They would say, "Well, he's not sharp anymore. We can't send him on the road for 75 days to stay in a hotel. What happens if something happens to him?" Well, what happens to somebody who doesn't have Parkinson's and they die in their hotel room or disappear, whatever? So those fears were in here. Nobody ever said that to me. Nobody at the studios, but I was actually creating and manifesting it to where my business took the brunt of it, and what eventually ended my career in that environment. Some people could say, "Oh well, you have Parkinson's and we worry about you," but well, that's great, but thinking that I can't do something that I'm telling you I can do is not for either one of us to really think about it. It's really for all of us to say, what can we do? How can we get you involved? And when you're talking about how can we get you involved, that's immediate. And therefore, you want like the Wellness Foundation, or the fund, Parkinson's Wellness Fund, will come in and say, we'll spot you. You want to try to walk, 1,000 miles, we'll spot you. Or, you need a boxing trainer because boxing is really good for you, we'll get you that trainer. Or you want to learn how to ride a bike, and get in a road race, we'll figure out how to get you that. They may not be able to get you the $5,000 or $8,000 bicycle, but they may be able to get you the training that, will cost. So it's like, we can't really, although I'm grateful that the Fox Foundation and Parkinson's Foundation are there because they're amazing in what they do. There has to be a secondary group that focuses on, and this is a lot of what the Parkinson's Foundation focuses on, as well as Parkinson's Wellness Fund, is right here, right now. What can we do to make your life better daily? And that's really all what we're searching for, is how can we make our lives better daily? My wish for the support of a company like the Parkinson's Wellness Fund and is that they continuously expand into what, let me back up. They continuously expand into new ideas. So boxing is great. Tai Chi is great. Tandem bicycle riding is great. All proven exercises to help slow down the progression or make you feel better than you would have if you didn't do it. But then there's things that I saw the other day, which I'm actually intrigued about and wanting to find out about it, is, what's it called? Pickleball. They have a Parkinson's pickleball league, and I'm like, I'm all over that, man. And, people say, well, you don't look like you have Parkinson's. Or I'm like, well, what does that look like? Because each person is different. No two Parkinson's patients are the same. So I could be sitting across from you. You could be diagnosed at the same time. Could be diagnosed the same day. Your body is going to be different than mine. Your mind is going to be different than mine. But anything, I believe, I'm a firm believer that anything that gives you exercise, both cognitive and physical, cardio, whatever it may be, but also gives you a sense of community. And I think really sometimes a sense of community is a lot stronger than anything else, because this is an isolating disease, because it's only one-on-one. One person can have the disease, but the next person is going to be totally different than them. I think it's imperative that they continue to grow programs that build community. And ping pong, Parkinson's, paddle, whatever it is, pickleball. I mean, those are things that I think are amazing. And they're ingenious people who think of these ideas, but they may not have the funding to do it. So that's where I think, and by the way, I know that all organizations, Parkinson's Foundation, they do write grants. So I totally understand it. But the idea of something like the wellness fund, which is, hey, I want to do something very specific. I want to train for 5 sessions with a boxing instructor. Okay, how much is that going to be? Okay, done. And it doesn't matter, it doesn't matter to them. It just matters as long as they can give it to somebody. And the cool thing is they give it to the trainer or they give it to the person that is running the business. So the Parkinson's patient just has to show up. We don't have to worry about writing checks or bringing credit cards or, it's just like, hey, come work out. You're taken care of. We've got these 5 sessions. Let's pick the days and let's have some fun. And it really is, when you're given a gift like that, it's an opportunity to springboard it into other things. And I know for a lot of people, they're older, they have maybe limited resources or fixed sources of income, and Parkinson's just comes barreling in saying, here's what we're going to do. But I think helping a community financially is a hurdle that will get them, I think, to a better place, which is a community. And then once you have the community built, then it can grow, and you feel like when I used to go to boxing classes with neuroboxing, which is a good facility, it was really funny. There was a long row of chairs that we used to all change into our boxing gloves and wrap our hands and all that stuff. And then a lot of wives were there for the gentlemen, and then a couple of gentlemen were there for their wives. And I always kind of went. Heidi, I think, went once because she wanted it to be about me and not about her. And my daughters came with me a couple of times. It was really funny. My daughter Gracie really took to it, and one of the coaches said, "Hey, if you want to train her privately, I can turn her into a boxer." And I thought, well, I don't want her. That's up to her. I'm not going to make the decision. But the idea that when you cross the threshold of any Parkinson's related group, there's a sense of empowerment because you're now the normal person. Because all these 50 boxers or all these 40 paddleball players all have Parkinson's. They're not at the same level, they're not at the same age, not even the same backgrounds, but they all have Parkinson's. And those people sitting along the wall, they're the ones that are on the outside, jokingly, of course, because the with Parkinson's, the caregiver community is invaluable, and not enough is done for the caregivers. And I know I just watched my mom go through my dad. My dad had a stroke about a year ago. I think it's and he went through an emergency surgery. Then he was 3 weeks into in the hospital recuperating, and then he had a stroke. So I think he was in for 7 or 8 weeks, maybe even longer. And my mom is 81 years old, and my sister lives in Chico, and then my brother and other sister and myself live in Los Angeles. So there was nobody there. So once we got brought into everything, and then we all took 2 weeks at a time. And I have a very good boss that lets me. I work out of the house, but he let me work wherever I needed to work. And I think what's amazing is when you see what a caregiver goes through. And it can be for anything. It's just not Parkinson's. It can be, a cancer patient. It can be dementia. It can be, all these things. That Alzheimer's disease. When you see what a caregiver goes through, and a friend of mine said to me the other day, because she took care of her mom for 10 years with Parkinson's, and she said, "I don't have Parkinson's," and she has degrees in neurology, and she said, I don't have Parkinson's, so it's hard for me to sit here and talk about what you're talking about, because at a certain point I become a liar, you know what I mean, because she's not having Parkinson's. But she said, when you're with somebody for 10 years every day of the week, and you're taking care of them, and you're feeding them, and you're taking them out to get their hair done or whatever it may be, in the case of her beautiful mom, it's like they do have Parkinson's. In a way. And I don't wish it on anybody. I'm sure people would be offended by hearing that. But more has to be done for the immediate, and more has to be done for the caregiver. because it's great to be in the community, but unless you really push the community, you're just going to go home and sit in the chair and kind of relax into trying to go to sleep that night. And it can become very patterned and very routine. And I've gone through all of those experiences in the last 2 or 3 years. I mean, certain things get better for me, other things get less than better. But I try to live by the mantra that I have good days and I have great days, because if you're not enjoying the fact that you're alive and you're living with something that's challenging, and it's not an easy aspect to live with, and it's not something that everybody gets a cold, everybody and this is like serious stuff. But there are amazing people at all these foundations that are trying to do whatever they can to get programs together, and Parkinson's Wellness Fund is a perfect example of what it takes to give people something instantly. Instantly. The pandemic for me psychologically I allowed it to play on my mind. There was never a comfortable feeling. It felt like I was constantly on uneven ground or quicksand. I don't know what quicksand is like, but the idea that I could go over it and not because I had lost my balance or anything like that, because I would watch the news and it was just like, I went through 9/11, having flown out of there the morning of 9/11 out of New York City to go to Chicago. And by the time I got to Chicago, it had all gone down, and people were frantic. I would just come off this plane. I was actually sleeping through the whole flight, and I didn't know what was going on. And people were just running, but it didn't seem like, it wasn't like pure panic. It was like some people were like watching what was going on, and other people were like. And I got in this cab, and I was supposed to fly back from Chicago. I was doing some interviews for a project for MGM, and I flew in I went New York to Chicago, did 3 interviews, packed up my stuff, and left. So I checked my bags through. So I didn't take them off the plane. I just walked off the plane with my briefcase and my computer. And I got to this room, and the DP came in. We set it up, and it was all ready for the interview. And then I get the phone rings, and we're watching this go down. And the guy calls me up, and he goes, "I'm not going to be able to get off the ground. They grounded my flight from Kentucky to Chicago, so we'll have to do it another time." And we said goodbye. And then the next guy called up, and he said, "I'm not going to be able to get in from wherever he was coming from." And so I'm sitting there with the DP and the sound man who lit this thing beautifully, and we're talking. And the phone rings, and this guy goes, "I'm about 40 minutes away from you guys. I've been driving for 2 hours now. You still want me to come? Because I'm okay to come." And I said, "Well, if you're willing to come, we're willing to record." And those guys became galvanized in my life. I know exactly where I was and what was going on that day because of the camaraderie of people sitting together. And you had asked me, we were talking about the good things.
Something that improved.
So
you were talking about pandemic.
Right. Pre-pandemic, because when the pandemic shut down all the gyms and all the places, and it made me uncomfortable about going out and going to places where, I had all the vaccinations, but I was sort of like, the mask thing was driving me crazy, and it was just a tough time, to say the least, as it was for everybody. I'm nobody special, but it was just harder for me to. So one of the things that fell by the wayside was my boxing. Prior to that, I had done 2.5 years of boxing, and I will tell you that just punching the bag, doing the exercises, the calisthenics and all that stuff, I literally had a better shape in my body than I ever had. And literally, my wife said to me, she's like, "You got your shoulders back," because I was just constantly moving and constantly punching, and I was in a better. It's like, I don't know if I'm in a better physical state, the physicality wise, or was I better 3 or 5 years ago? Because I think that you start to realize that with time, everything gets a little bit smaller. It's not as big as catastrophic, or it's not as big as, or something that seemed really small and you kind of glossed over it because it was all positive and you didn't think about it, all of a sudden comes back and you go, wow, I did this. I never thought this would go anywhere. And look where it went, you know. And so I think that exercise in any type of program that is good for both cognitive and cardio. When people ask me like, what do you do? And I'm like, well, I love boxing. And the reason why I love boxing is because while you're punching to, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, or whatever the trainer's got you doing, you're not only doing a physical thing, but you're also working your mind, because you're basically saying, oh, I got to remember, okay, 1 is a jab, 2 is a cross, or a cross like this. And so then you got to remember, he's yelling at you, get your hands up. This is great so you can punch, but you're knocked out. And he's like, get your hands up. And so you have to think of all these things. So it's not like you're sitting on a treadmill watching the news. Got your earphones in, you're listening to rock and roll music or whatever, you're listening to some book on tape. Your mind is elsewhere. What I have found that really works with a lot of people is the immediate. If you stay in that task that you're doing, whether it's like running a marathon or walking a marathon or riding a bike for 100 miles, Tai Chi, whatever makes you feel good. And again, these are small things that the Parkinson's Wellness Fund can absolutely fund. You know what I mean? This is the things that they're looking to help people out with. Then you sort of like your mind and your body have an outlet. And I swear, I say this differently now, but I used to walk out of there. Their facility used to be in Agora Hills, and I lived in North Hills, which was Northridge area. So it was like a 40-minute commute. But I would drive there, and my mind would go, how can we get out of this? So it was just I'm a notoriously procrastinating, lazy person. And they would say, how can, and then I'd get there, and I would walk out of that after that hour of training, hour and 15 minutes of training. I couldn't find Parkinson's in my body. Like nothing felt wrong. And then like 30 minutes later, it would come back because I spent 30 minutes going, where's the Parkinson's? Where's the Parkinson's? I should have just let it go. But the idea of doing something for your body and your mind is key. And that can be walking and talking with your best friend, but walk at a quicker pace or walk up a hill. Try to mix up your thing so it's just not the same like you're walking the dog and you're just kind of meandering along. Walk like you have to be somewhere. But I don't know if I'm like better or worse off. I mean, some things, again, like I think it's more my mind. Like I was having dinner with friends last night, and I looked out the window at these people just like laughing, and I was sort of kind of a little dyskinetic, getting a little later on in the evening, and my mind went, it's too bad you can't be like them. It's too bad you're not normal anymore. And then I said to myself, well, what the hell is normal? I mean, what kind of life do you want? That's it. What kind of life do you want? If you want something that's going to be impactful and help people out and bring you joy. I mean, nothing brings me joy than doing stuff like this to help somebody out because somebody helped me out. I mean, I love talking to people. I love, being invited to, hey, can you be on this panel? Or, hey, can you? And I say, just out of curiosity, why am I on this panel? And they'd be like, well, you got a good message. I'm like, yeah, but who am I? I mean, it's like, occasionally they say, well, because you're in the film industry and it's high profile. I'm like, okay, well, that's fair enough. I mean, but the point is, I'm asking them not to satiate my ego, but really to find out what works, because I love doing this. I love helping people. That's, I think there was a question in here, if I remember correctly, about what was my life before the diagnosis. I would say, and I've said this many times before, but I wanted to write a book about my experiences because I've had some really fun, wonderful experiences, met amazing people, been in places I probably shouldn't have been, except because I was in the film industry. And I tell these funny stories. And I used to say, Parkinson's destroyed my career, but saved my life. Now, the first part of it is not true. It didn't really destroy my career. It gave me something to hold on to say, well, this is why. This has got to be why. Because I had this disease. This makes perfect sense. Now, I'll go back 40 years and I'll tell you exactly what, But saving my life, I think it did, because I was on such a roll at the time. Everything was just great. And I was traveling 75 nights in a row. And I have a daughter, 2 daughters, and a wife that probably understood why I was doing, I love what I was doing. I've been a fan of the film industry, but at that stage, that's a single man's game. That's not a guy with a wife and 2 daughters that are going to school and they came out to visit. I mean, it wasn't, they lived a wonderful life, but the reality is that you're not there. And the idea of being there, what Parkinson's has given me is a numerous things. I mean, my wife said, I think you've been given Parkinson's as a gift. And I looked at her like, are you insane? I mean, it's the worst gift in the world. And she's like, no. She's like, I think you're here to help people. And I said, well, that's great. How do I do that? And just literally living in that moment, just staying in the moment for as long as you possibly can before it goes away. That's universal. That has nothing to do with Parkinson's. But as a Parkinson's patient, let me back up. As a person with Parkinson's, I can absolutely say that gift from the Parkinson's Wellness Fund for me to go and work with a boxing trainer to be able to keep my skill level up, that gives me the opportunity to say, okay, I want to pay it forward. And people would totally understand if I just said, I'm out, I'm checking out. I can't deal with this anymore, but I kind of still want to see what tomorrow's going to bring. If I'm diagnosed with it, what about the kids? I mean, are they genetically, positioned to have? And Michael J. Fox had a great quote. He said, genetics loads the gun, environment pulls the trigger. And so the idea is, and I will tell you this, one thing that I've definitely learned through the last probably 7 or 8 years of meditation, probably six years of meditation and mindfulness and gratitude and forgiveness and all those types of things. If you start to think you're going to have it, you'll manifest it. So don't do it. Just let the thought go. It's just like somebody said to me about forgiveness. I said, gratitude and forgiveness, I think, are kind of running, like they would be 2 peas in a pod, but there would be a third one there that, to make them all different. But I think if you're gracious for what you have, there really is no room for you to be angry at somebody who took your bicycle when you were 5 and now you're 55 and you won't talk to him and he lives in the same town and you were best friends. It's like, why harbor that? And I'm saying it and my voice is going, are you for real, dude? You're the king of harboring shit. But at the same time, I know that it's correct. I know that it's right. It's that we're not meant to walk around with all this anxiety, all this anguish, all this hatred, all this bitterness. I mean, I grew up with it. I grew up with the anger. I grew up with the anxiety, the fear, things that just paralyze people. And I watched people who would never get on an airplane, and I couldn't understand that. Because my dad, mom and dad, when I was little, they sent me up to New York from Maryland to go stay with my grandmother. And I loved the airline. I was more terrified being with a bunch of people I didn't really know, because my dad wanted to give me a trip and looking back on it, when you look back on like the fear or the trepidation you might have, or the anxiety over doing something and the hand wringing, and you're creating all this in your body, and then you go do the experiment, or you go do the event rather, and you go, well, that was nothing. I mean, I thought, I tell the story in much length, but in my career, I had the privilege of landing onto and being catapulted off of an aircraft carrier 200 miles out to sea, just because we were doing the behind the scenes of a scene that they were shooting for this Sony picture. And I remember, when I speak to kids in colleges and whatnot, I remember I've always say, like, life is about experience. And whether you're experiencing it without Parkinson's or whether you're experiencing it with Parkinson's, for the majority of the experience, both people can experience it the same way. There might be a physical limitation, there might be a cognitive limitation, but the idea of having the experience and trying all these things, when you get an incurable to this date disease, you start to look at everything differently. Well, I would never have bungee jumped, but I'm going to try it. What do I got to lose? You know what I mean? Or I'm going to race cars, or whatever you want to do, is just do it. Because I think the finish line is not about how much money you have or what the career was that you had. I think the finish line is how great were your experiences, or how much did you experience. They might not all be great, but learning that people will step up for you at an amazing time. And my friends, I can sit here and list off a list of people that are just ridiculously helpful and wonderful and check in on me and call me and make sure I'm okay. That kind of environment, when I was at the top of my game, I don't think I would have what I have now, which is my wife and my daughters. That's really all I have, and so the idea that, it's just like all these things I learned when I was a kid, you can't take it with you. So enjoy it. Don't worry about it. Don't stress about it. I stressed about all the stuff when I was making a really great living. And instead of going, I've got all this earnings potential, let's do something wonderful, let's do something great. We donated money. We worked in soup kitchens and all kinds of stuff like that. But I've done more charitable work or more giving work since having this than I probably have ever done in my life. Because if somebody says, hey, come do this, and I'm like, I can't afford it, and they go, don't worry about the money, just come, we want you there because you represent X, Y, and Z, then I will go. And you learn how to say thank you. You learn how to say, I'm grateful for this. As my wife said this morning, because my friends take care of me, and I'm like, I feel like I'm being treated differently because of where my career is gone and so forth and so on, and Parkinson's on top of that. And it's really funny because my wife said, you need to learn, it's your time to learn to receive. Because I was always the guy that wanted to pay for the dinner. I was always the guy that wanted to take everybody out or get the expensive bottle of wine or go to Vegas and get cigar, whatever. I was always trying to do something nice for everybody. And the reality is that some of it was ego, some of it was genuine, or most of it was genuine, but I was living a life just over my means, and as a family we were caught up in the nice things that we were able to do. Never thinking that one day, you're not making that money anymore. We're closing down the department. What do you mean? I mean, closing down the department? I am the department. Yeah, exactly. So we're closing you down. And so, you learn, and it seems, again, catastrophic, but to use this analogy, and I don't know how you can cut this up, but if somebody says, in today's world, somebody says, okay, JT, we're not going to do this anymore. We got to cut you loose from your job that you've been doing for X amount of years, and you make a great living, but we can't help you out. Okay, there's initial shock. It could be anger, it could be fear, it could be all those things. Could be relief. You're like, guy, I was looking for a way to get out of here. The universe showed it to me. But you're going to go find another job. You're going to go do something with the rest of your life. You have Parkinson's, and somebody goes, you have Parkinson's. You just disappear. That's it. I'm out. And I mean, I worked out with guys that were 90 years old that were in amazing shape. And we called him Iron Mike. When I first started boxing, he came in, he was bent over like this. And through all of his working out, he was like this, and then his wife used to have to keep him on like a belt so she was tethered to him because he would go right over. That guy is amazing. I mean, he showed up and punched that bag with whatever he had to do. His voice was gone. This guy was a firefighter, like a big time firefighter, captain, whatever you call him. I'm not sure. And I think in all the years he very rarely spoke, but he would get the smile on his face when he was goofing around, and he still had a sense of humor. And I just think myself, it's like I don't know if I ever want to be like that, but that's a person that shows you that there's always an opportunity, there's always an experience, there's always something you can do, even if you have diminished capabilities. But if you let your mind tell you that you've got diminished capabilities, you're out. So it's like, it's not what you can't do, it's what you can do, and push forward.